I consider Hollow Knight to be one of the greatest indie games ever made, and just one of the best games of all time, period. It set such a high bar, and while there are absolutely other amazing indie video games that are so deserving of high praise, I have been consistently itching for that game that would give me the same feeling Hollow Knight once did back in 2018. And for the past year or so now, I have had a keen eye on a little game called Nine Souls. I knew next to nothing about it other than the art style completely blew me away, and it was inspired by Sekiro's combat system with a heavy focus on parrying. Sounds intriguing, right? Well, I am here to tell you this game absolutely rocks, and after completing it, this has joined the ranks of some of my favorite indie video games of all time, and I do not say that lightly. So let's just jump into why I think this game is so unique and deserves to be in conversation for the best indie video game since Hollow Knight. Now, Nine Souls took me by real surprise in this department. I expected, per usual, metroidvanias like Hollow Knight, it was going to take a very indirect approach. Not too much dialogue, but really lore heavy. But I was very shocked that when booting this up for the first time, there was not only a lot of dialogue, but our main character even talked. Again, this may seem like a weird thing to point out, but I really didn't look too much into this, so I was just genuinely surprised when there was going to be such a present narrative. And even better, it's very good. You play as Yi, who we do not know much about in the beginning other than he seems to be hiding something about himself. Something goes wrong in the beginning and his plan of getting revenge gets started a little earlier than expected. And then our journey begins. You are tasked with defeating the 9 souls of this realm, which are very powerful beings, but why exactly? Well, that's part of the fun. This game has such a fun cast of characters that you will find in the world to take back to your central hub and join your team and help you on your journey. And what I find even cooler is that you get to learn the backstory of each of these souls after defeating them. You go into this quiet realm and it has this beautiful art style and gives you an idea of how each of these people got to be in the position they are in, and you often learn their personal connection and relationship to Yi as well. Now, I really would like to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, of course, because especially towards the end, things just really ramp up story-wise, and I found myself really enjoying these characters in this world, and I just can't say enough good things about this game's story. Took me by complete surprise in the best way possible. Just to cover slightly on the graphics and performance, this game ran like an absolute dream. I played the entirety of it on a Steam Deck, and if the art style doesn't already speak for itself, this game is gorgeous. All hand-drawn animation that just looks jaw-dropping on the Steam Deck OLED. I ran a pretty consistent 60 FPS with the extreme rare frame rate dips sometimes. Now, this game also has such a unique setting and world too. They call this Taopunk, which is a blend between cyberpunk and Taoism, and yeah, it's about as cool as it sounds. Every location has its own unique art style, enemy types, and it just felt really good. Exploration was pretty rewarding as well. Now, if I had to say anything slightly negative, it is the overall Metroidvania aspects of it. Again, for me personally, this wasn't really a huge deal, but I figured I would set some sort of expectations, because this is not as large as something like Hollow Knight, and I do not think it has as deep Metroidvania mechanics as that and others in this genre. The world is open, but you are put on a relatively linear path overall. It's not like Hollow Knight where you can get so lost so quickly just exploring this world. And you will do the typical thing, of course, where you get an ability and later you'll have to come back and revisit that to get to a new location. But again, it's not as deep as some of the other games I mentioned. I just felt like the overall design could have been expanded on just a little bit more, but again, I have to preface this really wasn't a huge problem for me personally, and I do think it fits this world overall, and what this game does that's exceptional more than makes up for these minor shortcomings. And speaking of, let's look at this game's strongest aspect by far. Sekiro to me has one of the best combat systems in gaming, and I don't think that should even be remotely considered a hot take. There are just so few games that offer this level of satisfaction when it comes to perfectly learning boss movesets and getting those perfect parries down. It's just a phenomenal feeling that's hard to replicate. So when I first heard about this game, and literally in their description was Sekiro deflection-based combat system, I was intrigued pretty much immediately. And I thought, man, a 2D Sekiro game sounds great. But little did I know this game is so much more than just 2D Sekiro. Now, you of course have your basic attacks that will combo after 3 consecutive hits, a charge attack to do heavy damage, you have a dash ability of course, but the most unique part is of course that parrying system and its talismans. With each successful parry, you build up this chi meter, which allows you to then attach a talisman to an enemy and watch them explode. It is insanely satisfying to pull off. Now this can be difficult to execute because in the beginning of this, your only talisman that you have to hold down the RB button to pull this off, which leaves you incredibly vulnerable. Now later in the game, you will unlock more, and it is highly encouraged to change them up depending on your needs. Like one of them, for example, allows you to attach it to 2 different people, and this came in real big handy when there were big mobs of enemies or the rare case where I fought 2 bosses at the same time. I always enjoyed unlocking new ones, and I loved how it changed up the gameplay. There are also 2 types of damage both you and enemies can take. Direct damage, which can be only recovered by healing items, and internal damage, which will heal over time. Now, attaching a talisman to an enemy will remove this internal damage, and they will not recover it. You also have a variety of these nodes that you can mix and match to help with your preferred playstyle, extremely similar to the charms in Hollow Knight. The combat just feels absolutely spectacular, and the level of satisfaction when you get so many consistent parries down just to explode your enemy with a perfectly timed talisman, it's just unmatched. You will also receive a bow and arrow later, which you can switch between different arrows on the fly. Again, just further adding to the gameplay loop. Now, having a good combat system is essential in a game like this, and I think it is extremely well done here. But there is only one thing that can further enhance a good combat system, and that's good. Now, I was already thoroughly impressed with Nine Souls after several hours of playtime, but it was when I got to that first main story boss when I realized this game was operating on another level. Just like Sekiro, these bosses feel like a dance. On the base difficulty, there is absolutely no way to spam your way to victory. You must have perfectly timed attacks, dodges, and memorize almost every move to attain victory. That mixed with an incredible official soundtrack, and I was just grinning from ear to ear this entire fight. I'm also a pretty big fan of when bosses have multiple phases, and almost every single one of these has that, which is phenomenal. And don't worry, I'm going to keep the gameplay of the bosses very limited because they are also unique, and experiencing each of the 9 souls is just a part of this incredible journey. And just so you know, some of these give Hollow Knight bosses a run for its money, and again, I do not say that lightly. Several of these bosses just left my jaw on the floor after finishing it. And now I did mention difficulty earlier because I played on the standard difficulty, which is definitely meant to be played if you love a good challenge, and trust me, this will provide that. But if you feel like you are not as good as these kind of games, there is a story mode difficulty option. So either way, I highly encourage anyone and everyone to check this game out. And I also mentioned earlier that after defeating each of these, you get a look into their story and how they got to where they are. And again, I just can't say enough how cool that is. Now, I am in the same boat with a lot of others right now, and that I am desperately waiting for Hollow Knight's Silksong, and I can happily say this has scratched that itch and then some. There is also a pretty hefty amount of content in here as well, and a true ending that you can unlock, which may take well over 30 hours to do. And all of that for the price of around $30. This is an absolute steal, and I could not encourage you enough to check this game out. They do plan on having a console release at some point, but for now it is just on Steam. Check it out, let me know what you think. Trust me on this one, this game absolutely rips.